Hey everyone, it's Tony with Hidden Light Photography. Do you have a Newtonian reflector, or are you thinking about getting a Newtonian reflector? Well, Newtonian reflectors are almost synonymous with the word collimation. Yes, I know collimation is something that makes a lot of us cringe, but don't worry. Today, I'm going to show you my personal method of collimating Newtonian reflectors. So if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button. I don't want you to miss out on any valuable information. Now let's jump in and learn how to collimate a Newtonian reflector. Before we get started, if this is your first time collimating, I do request that you watch this video in its entirety before putting tools to your OTA or making any adjustments. Watch each step with your OTA in front of you and the Cheshire Collimating Eyepiece installed, and familiarize yourself with what you are looking for and can comfortably identify each item. This will allow you to follow along more easily when you go back and follow step by step with tools in hand and making the adjustments yourself. Now, thinking about collimating a Newtonian reflector can be scary, and that's okay. It's okay to be scared, it's okay to be uncomfortable with thinking about collimating your Newtonian reflector. Embrace the fear, embrace the discomfort. Fear and discomfort keep us cautious. It keeps us careful, and that's exactly what we want actually. These things can be expensive, they're very sensitive optical instruments, and we want to be careful. And I'm going to show you exactly what you need. I'm going to show you my method of collimating, and I'm going to show you collimation is really not that bad. So here I have my Skywatcher 200p. It's an 8-inch Newtonian reflector, and it has a focal ratio of 4. It's an f4 telescope. Now, the faster your telescope or the lower your f number is, it does get a little bit harder to collimate. So keep that in mind that if you have an f4 or an f5 telescope, it might be a little bit more challenging to collimate. And all that means is it might take you a little bit longer. Collimating is not a race. It is perfectly okay for it to literally take you hours to collimate the first time. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing shameful in that. Um, Set aside time. Do it during the day so you're not rushing to get out under the stars. Ideally, if you have a couple of days where you're not going to be imaging, do it then so that then you have plenty of time and you're not tempted to rush. So, to get started, what do we need? Your secondary mirror is going to have 3 adjustment screws. They can be hex heads, they can be Phillips heads, or you can have them upgraded to Bob's knobs. Bob's knobs, you can do it with your hands. Otherwise, you'll need an Allen wrench or Phillips head screwdriver depending on which type of screw you have. Next, you're going to need your collimation eyepiece. Now, I like the Cheshire collimating eyepiece. It's made by Apertura. I got this off of highpointscientific.com. Now, there are laser collimators and things like that. This is what I learned on, and I never had an issue, so why change it up? This is very easy to use. Now, getting to know this, you're going to have a little hole here, and that's what you're going to look through. That is your eyepiece. And next, on the other side, you're going to see a 45-degree angle. And what this piece does is it allows light to get into the eyepiece so you can see what you're doing. You want to make sure you have plenty of light to do this. Now, when I say plenty of light, don't go to a super bright area because you can hurt your eyes, right? So a well-lit room, and what I like to say is point your aperture at a white surface, a white sheet, or in my case here, a white closet door. You want to have a neutral white area because then you can see the shadows that you're looking for in order to collimate. Next, at the bottom of the Cheshire eyepiece, you're going to see these crosshairs, okay? And these crosshairs, what they're going to do is give you a big superimposed crosshair pattern when you look through the eyepiece. And that superimposed crosshair pattern is actually what we're going to be aligning everything up to. And it really is that easy. So next, let's go ahead and go through the anatomy of the telescope and what we're going to be adjusting and how to adjust. And when you're making these adjustments, go a little bit at a time. Go nice and slow, nice and easy, and really figure out which adjustment knobs move the items that we're trying to move in the correct direction, and just work it a little bit at a time. First, let's get to know what we're going to be working with when we collimate our Newtonian reflector. At the very front, we have our aperture. This is where the light from our object comes in. And as you can see, at the very back over there is our primary mirror. The light reflects off of the primary mirror and then comes back to the secondary mirror, which is housed right at the center here at our spider vanes. The light then reflects off of our secondary mirror and gets focused through our focuser tube and then gets to our camera sensor. The object of collimating is aligning our optical train. And when we collimate, we're going to start at the front of the telescope and work our way to the back. We're going to start with these 3 adjustment screws. Now these 3 adjustment screws at the center of the spider vanes could either be hex heads, they could be Phillips screws, or you can upgrade them to Bob's knobs. Either way will work, and the type of screw that you have will determine the tools that you need. Now, moving to the back of the telescope, we have our primary mirror cell. And our primary mirror cell back here houses our primary mirror. And again, you're going to see another set of screws. You'll have a locking screw and you'll have an adjustment screw. Always consult your optical tube manual to figure out which one is which. In this particular case with the Skywatcher 200p, the taller, thinner screws are going to be the locking screws. And then the shorter, fatter screws are going to be the adjustment screws. To get started, we're going to be installing the Cheshire Collimating Eyepiece into our focuser assembly. You do want your focuser assembly to be racked all the way in. If you focus manually, go ahead and use the knobs to rack your focuser all the way in. If, like me, you have an electronic autofocuser, go ahead and use your favorite control software to rack your focuser all the way in. Keep in mind, if you have an electronic autofocuser, as you get close to being racked all the way in, go nice and slow so you don't overcorrect and cause any damage to your focuser. Now, I keep my coma corrector in all the time, so I'm going to start by removing my coma corrector. Now, the Cheshire Collimating Eyepiece is a 1¼ inch diameter. My focuser here is a 2-inch diameter. So I do need a conversion piece here to go from 2 inches to 1¼ inches. Now, for demonstration purposes, let's pretend that my focuser is racked all the way in. I'm going to go ahead and lock my conversion piece in place. And then I'm going to take my Cheshire Collimating eyepiece and install it into the focuser. I'm not going to lock it in yet. And the reason is I want to align the Cheshire Collimating eyepiece to my ideal position. Now, I can't directly show you through the eyepiece, so here's a graphic showing you what I mean. The Cheshire Collimating eyepiece has a set of crosshairs, and those crosshairs are going to appear through the eyepiece as big superimposed crosshairs. Now, the way I like to align this is I like to make sure that the crosshairs, the superimposed crosshairs from the Cheshire Collimating eyepiece, are parallel to the spider vein shadow. And to do that, all we simply do is we take our Cheshire Collimating eyepiece and we rotate it in the focuser. And as we rotate the Cheshire Collimating eyepiece, you're going to see the big superimposed crosshairs rotate. And you're going to rotate it until you are parallel to the spider vein shadow. That's not necessary. You can get away with it being in any position. The ideal position that you want is so that there's plenty of light coming through that 45-degree portion of the Cheshire Collimating eyepiece. I like to align it to the spider vein crosshairs or spider vein shadow for a reason, and we'll get into that as we go through this video. So now that I'm aligned, I'm going to go ahead and now lock my Cheshire Collimating eyepiece in place. Now from here, what we're going to do is we're going to start off at the front of the telescope. We're going to start by aligning our secondary mirror to our primary mirror. And what we're aligning is the primary mirror centering spot. And that centering spot is going to appear as a little circle, as you can see here in the graphic. We want to get that centering spot in the center of our superimposed crosshairs. To do that, we're going to be utilizing the 3 adjustment screws on the secondary mirror housing. Start by go ahead and just slowly loosening up all 3 of the adjustment screws on the secondary mirror. You want to go nice and slow. You don't want to make a big adjustment at this point. What you're looking for is which screw makes the biggest movement, the biggest or most correct movement of that centering spot towards the center of the big superimposed crosshairs. Once you find which adjustment screw makes the best, most accurate adjustment of the centering spot towards the center of the big superimposed crosshairs, continue to adjust that screw. Now, it's important to understand that as you make these adjustments, as you're working that screw to move that centering spot towards the center of the big superimposed crosshairs, you may run into a scenario where that adjustment screw feels loose and it's no longer making contact with your secondary mirror. That's okay. What you want to do is take one of the other 2 adjustment screws and then tighten that screw. Tightening that screw will allow the secondary mirror to make contact with your initial adjustment screw again. You want to try to only use 2 screws to make this adjustment. That makes it a lot easier using 2 screws. You may, however, find that you need to utilize all 3 screws, but as you make the adjustment on the screw that makes the most correct adjustment of the centering spot towards the center of the big superimposed crosshairs, as you make that adjustment, you're turning that screw out and you lose contact with the secondary mirror, take your other adjustment screw and start tightening it. And just work it a little bit at a time until you get the centering spot as close to perfectly centered with the big superimposed crosshairs as you can. And again, you may need to use the third screw to fine tune it. Now, this isn't a race. Your first time collimating may take hours, and that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this process taking a very long time. That is where embracing the fear, embracing the discomfort of collimating comes in. Embrace the fear, embrace the discomfort, because that keeps us careful. It keeps us cautious, and that's what we want. You don't want to rush this, because rushing this, you can make mistakes, and then we have to go back and correct those mistakes. So just work your adjustment screws a little bit at a time and just work that centering spot to the center of the big superimposed crosshairs. When you're done, it should look something like this. Now it's time to move to the back of the OTA and make the adjustments to the primary mirror cell. Now again, you want to make sure to read your OTA's manual to find out which screws are the locking screws and which screws are the adjustment screws. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your locking screws and you're going to loosen them up. And you want to make sure that you loosen these way up. Back them all the way out. You don't want them to inhibit any adjustments that you're trying to make to the primary mirror cell. Now, the same concept follows as did with the secondary mirror adjustment. You may find that as you are making adjustments to the adjustment screws, that you lose contact with the primary mirror cell, in which case you're going to want to use one of the other two screws and tighten those up in order to regain contact. We'll get into that in just a moment. Now, there is a little bit of a trick to this, and I'm going to show you an easy way. So if we take a look at this graphic here, the object of your primary mirror cell adjustment is to center your spider vane shadow with the superimposed crosshairs. And that's actually the exact reason why I like to rotate my Cheshire Collimating eyepiece so the big superimposed crosshairs are parallel to my spider vane shadow. It makes this adjustment a lot easier. And what we need to do is adjust the primary mirror cell adjustment screws to line that up. Now, which screw do we start with? That's where this trick comes in. So if you start at the center of the big superimposed crosshairs and you draw an imaginary line starting at the center of the big superimposed crosshairs and go through the center of the spider vane shadow, and then you take your hand or a screwdriver and you put it in front of the OTA, you'll see that through your Cheshire Collimating eyepiece. And you want to move the screwdriver or your hand around the OTA so the line created by your hand or the screwdriver is in line with the imaginary line that you drew from the center of the superimposed crosshairs through the spider vane shadow. And then once you find that location, let's pretend that that's right here. And we follow that down the OTA. the closest adjustment screw that you're at is going to be the adjustment screw you want to start with. In this case, it's going to be this adjustment screw right here. Now, let's say, for example, that line was right here. And we follow that down our OTA, and we end up over here, and we keep going down. The closest adjustment screw at that point is going to be this one right here. So we'll start with this adjustment screw. Now, as we're making our adjustment, let's say we need to start off with this adjustment screw up here. We're going to back this screw out, just like we did on the secondary mirror. And we're going to see the spider vane shadow start moving towards the center of the big superimposed crosshairs. And again, just like the secondary mirror adjustment, we could run into a scenario where we end up losing contact between our adjustment screw and the primary mirror cell. At that point, choose one of the other two adjustment screws and tighten it. And you want to tighten it until you regain contact. If you start moving in the wrong direction, if the spider vane shadow starts moving in the wrong direction when tightening the other adjustment knob, stop and try the other adjustment knob, the third adjustment knob, and see if you are continuing to go in the correct direction. And you want to work it very little at a time, just like you did with the secondary mirror adjustment. Work your adjustment knobs a little bit at a time until your spider vane shadow is as perfectly aligned to the big superimposed crosshairs as you can get it. Again, this isn't a race. You want to take your time and do this a little bit at a time. We don't want to make mistakes, so don't rush it. It is okay if this process takes hours. When you're in collimation, when you look through your Cheshire collimating eyepiece, it should look something like this. Now, another thing to consider is, even though you have your centering spot perfectly aligned with the big superimposed crosshairs and your spider vane shadow perfectly aligned with the big superimposed crosshairs, it may still look a little bit lopsided or a little bit misaligned. And that is because of the shadow that you see here. And that shadow is caused by tilt. And a lot of Newtonians have tilt naturally. And that's okay. You don't want to center the shadow. You want to make sure that you center the centering spot with the big superimposed crosshairs, and you center your spider vane shadow with the big superimposed crosshairs. If the shadow is off center or looks lopsided like you see in this graphic here, that is fine. All you want is your spider vane shadow and your centering spot aligned with your big superimposed crosshairs. And that's all that it takes to collimate your Newtonian reflector. So I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did and want to help support the channel, check out that join button and consider joining a Hidden Light Photography membership. There's lots of perks in it for you, and your support really helps me bring you more content. Another way you can help support the channel is checking out my High Point Scientific affiliate link located in the description of this video here if you're in the market for some new gear. Also, do me a favor. That channel icon that popped up, hit that channel icon and subscribe. I don't want you to miss out on any valuable information. Drop a comment in the comment section. Did you find this video useful? Have you collimated a telescope before? And then, check out that next video. Until the next time, clear skies.